was still in a dream when I woke up this morning. It was a chaotic and distorted dream, including a party with my family and this extremely large strawberry cheesecake that was slid under a table for later. I remember my disbelief at the size of the cake given the number of people in the room. And at the same time, there was this waitress who was not paying attention to the four of us who were sitting around a table in a small room off to the side. We couldn't even get her to return to our table, even though we had told her we were going to miss our show. My nephew took off abruptly when he noticed that his siblings were nowhere to be found, and there was something about 10 bicycles that would be displayed later for a fundraiser or something. And then our plane took off without my niece and nephews on board. And when I frantically ran over and told their mother, my younger sister, she just laughed. Incredulously, I burst into tears and started searching for a menu because I was already experiencing low blood sugar and I needed to order food. And then I woke up. I swear, sometimes I just don't understand dreams. Fortunately, such dreams are not regular occurrences for me, or else maybe I'm just fortunate to not remember them most of the time. But this morning, I knew I had to put some distance between that chaos and the immediate need of attending to this morning's service. I had to find a way to shift my energy so I could be about the task at hand, which quite honestly always feels less like a task on Sunday mornings and more like a prayer for all of you that I serve and the larger world. So I went to a place in my house where I used to do my spiritual practice. Yes, those of you who caught that, I did say used to because I have not been really consistent about my spiritual practice lately. I lit a candle and I searched for a meditation to help me return to my body and ground myself in a calm and loving energy. And I found a short one with Mother's Day in the title, which was one of the worst quality recordings I have ever heard. I had to turn the volume on my phone to its highest setting in order to hear the guide's quiet voice. After a brief setup, he said, gradually bring attention to your body. Gently bring your awareness to your breathing and focus on it. After reminding me of how to breathe calming breaths, he invited me to allow the mind to become single-pointed. And then he said, we bring to mind someone in our lives like a mother or someone who has shown us great kindness and affection. We recall with gratitude and kindness. We send them our gratitude, our peace, and our affection. We hold them in our heart. I sat with my eyes closed, imagining such a person, and then he said, send our gratitude, our affection, and our remembrance. And that was it. The calm man with a thick accent thanked me for practicing, and the recording went silent. In slightly more than 2 minutes, I began to feel so soothed, and I was reminded of gratitude and peace and affection. These three important qualities that we all need more of in our lives. I was instantly reminded that through this brief practice, these emotions or ways of being can help me return to a place of connection where my heart grows larger instead of retreating in fragility or fear or protectiveness. Every other week at Michael Servetus Unitarian Society these days, the MSUS Moms Group gathers on Zoom. Normally they meet once a month with their children in the room next door, but of course nothing is normal anymore. The format is informal. Each mom is honored by giving them the amount of time they need to check in. They can go as deep or as long as they want. This particular moms group has been together for a while, and they share a history of being in each other's presence. And boy, they have shown some profound source of support for one another when times have been rough in each other's lives. For me, it's been a gift to get to hear their unfiltered stories and to have access to their daily lives. It's provided me a greater understanding of how vastly different the experience of this time is for parents who have school-aged children or even some that are younger at home versus many of us who are living on our own or with friends, with older family members or with partners. The lives of the moms and their families have gone from managed chaos to being off balance. Families with school-aged children at home, they function as a whole system where everybody's actions impact each other's actions. Virginia Satir, the author of a book titled The New People Making, uses a metaphor of a mobile to paint a picture of a balanced family system. She says, in a mobile, all pieces, no matter what shape or size, can be grouped together in balance by shortening or lengthening the strings, rearranging the distance between pieces, or changing their weight. So it is with a family. None of the family members is identical to any other, which is different, and at the same, each is different, and each has a different level of growth. As in a mobile, you cannot arrange one member without thinking of the others. I remember owning a mobile when I was a kid, and we moved quite a bit. So I remember having to take it out of a box when it was all tangled and then trying to detangle it. And whenever we moved it, that thread that holds everything in balance must be just right. And the pieces need to be exactly where they belong, or else that horizontal level turns to one that is tilted, and it makes the other layers that hang below it get tangled as well. What I've noticed is that these kind of thoughtful and intentionally constructed families and lives are made up of predictable and reliable moments throughout days and weeks and years. Families do best when there is some certainty that the kids will wake up and they'll be ready on time, that the bus will come when expected. Days run smoothly when there's no call from the school saying your kid is sick and you need to go pick them up. Families count on activities and events connected both to school and outside of school to happen consistently. They rely on pickups and drop-offs running smoothly. Extended family members who support them showing up reliably. Childcare and after-school programs being open, and the other parent, if there is one that you share custody with, following through on their promises. They rely on getting to church for Sunday for a moment of spiritual reflection and social connection. All of these pieces have been torn apart by this virus. It's as if that very thread that held each piece of family life in balance was just snipped at an instant, leaving parents with the inconceivable reality of everyone being at home all the time. Now moms are expected to play multiple roles, including that of a teacher and a motivator, with little support and high expectations. A common saying used to remind parents that they need to tend to themselves before they can tend to others is one you have heard before, that one that is recited on airplanes where they tell us to please put your own oxygen mask on first before helping others. And the reason they say that is because if you run out of oxygen yourself, you are no good to anybody else and endangering your own life. Mothers and parents prior to this pandemic often struggled with finding time for themselves that is regenerative and grounding. But honestly, given the circumstances of this pandemic, it is really challenging for parents to find time and energy to fill their own emotional and spiritual wells. If you haven't figured this out yet or heard this story yet, just check in with a parent, somebody from this congregation or somebody else you know who is home with children, particularly parents who are continuing to work or have kids with special needs, and you will gain insight into what I am describing. Every time I end the Moms Group Zoom meetings, I leave with this deep sense of love and humility and compassion and the weight of knowing what they are carrying. So before I started to compose my words for today, I wrote on the top of the blank page, I want to write a sermon that is a love letter. Love letters are best when they are specific, when they name the unique beauty you see in someone and they reflect back to the beloved an image of someone who has changed you, who has touched you, who has let you in and shown their inner beauty. I want to write a love letter to mothers that starts and ends with, I love you. Because to love another is sacred act of care and vulnerability and gratitude. I want this sermon to serve as a love letter to all the mothers at Michael Servetus Unitarian Society who show up as best you can every day. And I pray that you know that to do that is simply enough. I pray that you can release yourself from the myths around mothering and that internal and external judgment that comes along with mothering. And I pray that you recognize that to compare yourself to the ideal depicted in social media or in guarded conversations is always dangerous business. I can guarantee you that no family looks and acts perfect all the time. I want to write a love letter to all the mothers who parent children as young as infants and all the way through adulthood, along with the mothers who have lost their precious children. I want to remind them and us to never forget the awe of that miracle of birth and the wonder that women's bodies grow new life, that women bring the next generation into the world. I want this to serve as a love letter that lets mothers know that I have seen their eyes light up in the presence of their children. I have noticed their tenderness and patience and compassion. I've seen them find their way into a lighthearted humor in order to pull a child out of a temper tantrum, out of grumpiness, uncertainty, and fear. I know some of their sacrifices and their delights, and I hope that we as part of a faith community can acknowledge both. I want them to know that when they're not around, we speak lovingly of their children, and for them to know that we are made better and brighter by having these parents and their children in our midst. I want to write a love letter to mothers, a letter that doesn't shy away from the truth and the complexity of life, but that envelops mothers with a love deep enough to sustain them for a while and vivid enough to remind them of their own inner light and strength. With each passing year, we are all called to grow and change. We live this human life not in isolation, but in relation to each other. Our mothers make and made choices that were often impacted by their own circumstances, some of which we may never know. The same is true for each of us. May this beloved community be a place where we can be honest about our families and our upbringings. To the mothers who are struggling in the midst of this pandemic, breathe, my dears. Don't forget to breathe. It'll help if you can take a moment to invite even that shortest meditation, even a bad quality meditation, or take a moment to read an inspiring reading, or even just have the release of a really good cry. There will be chaos, and even in the midst of the chaos, please try to remember to love yourself unconditionally, as we do, and as you deserve to be loved. Find a moment in your day to really see your child or children as the miraculous human beings that they are. I hope sometime today they make you smile and touch your heart, even if it is just in memory of times that once were. And I hope you take time to remember the community that cares for you, both in this church and in your daily lives beyond MSUS. Love to you, dear mothers. Love to us all on this day of remembering and kindness of affection, and of gratitude. May it be so. And amen. So I was thinking today that mothering and being mothered has its high moments and those deeply, deeply trying times. And I'm wondering if on this morning you'd be willing to share not a necessarily a glowing moment of mothering or your mother or a love that resembles that of mothers, but instead to share some humbling memory of being a parent or being parented, maybe a time when kindness, affection, and gratitude was needed in response to our own humanness and that we needed to sort of be reminded that we are enough even in our flawed state of being. So I'm asking for stories where you learned, where you may have stumbled, or your mother may have stumbled, and what you learned from this unique relationship of being mothered or the role of mothering. So I open it up to conversation.
Can they hear me?
We can hear you, Norma.
Yep.
Okay. 62 years ago, I moved from Indiana to Minnesota. I had no idea hardly where Minnesota was. I had a husband who was in his first year of teaching and he had the flu besides. So God love him, he didn't, you know. So I got this baby. I hardly knew one end of a baby from the other because I'd never been around a baby, but we survived. And the nice thing was the lady next door would invite me over for soap operas and coffee in the afternoon, and I could bring my baby. That was a wonderful thing that Agnes did. Yes.
The beauty of those simple acts of connectedness, huh, Norma?
Yes.
Norma.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you for sharing. Polly said, when I came out to my mom, she said, I love you no matter what, but please don't go on Oprah. Polly, that is awesome.
Richard, are you raising your hand with something?
I do, yeah. I have two stories. One, my mother, actually, English is not my first language. So before I could attend public school, she had to teach me English and how to sound out words, and I remember that. She died when I was in the 7th grade. And when I was in 11th grade, my father remarried, and I wasn't very nice to my stepmother, and I regret that because I later learned that from neighbors and associates how she defended me when my father complained about my teenage antics. So.
Richard, thank you for sharing that tender story. What was your first language?
Finnish.
Finnish. Okay, you just broke up a little bit when you were speaking. Thank you for sharing that thought and that reflection.
Carol, it looks like you have something to share. I'm trying to unmute you. Do you need to? There we go.
Hi, I'm Carol. I was talking to a friend recently and mentioning I was going to do some baking, and she said that she didn't know how to bake. Her mother had always discouraged her from making a mess in the kitchen. And I was thinking that it was great that my mom always let us kids make a mess. There were 4 of us girls. And she gave us free rein with everything. She gave us all art materials. When we were young, we each had an oil painting set. And, you know, we had turpentine and oil paints and canvases, and we just went to town with them. And we were given free rein in the kitchen to make whatever we wanted, whenever we wanted. And my older sister and I made donuts that had to be cooked in, they had to be deep fried. So we had this big deep pan of oil boiling away there on the stove. And, she never said you're making a mess or, be careful there, you're going to knock that over or anything like that. She just let us do what we wanted to do. And it was great. And that has given me a lot of free rein to be creative as an adult.
Thank you, Carol.
And I've unmuted Michelle Jarvie, I think.
Hi. I have a lot of emotions on this day. I always wake up remembering how it wasn't that long ago, although now it kind of has been, but 11 years ago when I lost my first husband, I thought my dream of being a mother was over. And I was for several years, I was just so depressed, wondering how my life would ever turn out and if anything would be worthwhile again. And then, I wake up and I'm next to my baby and it's just, I just start to cry. Like, I can't believe that this has all turned the way it has. And then when you were talking earlier, Reverend Laura, I was thinking about how really the first time I really felt like I was being a mother was when I became a teacher, which was a couple years after my husband died. And I opened my classroom up to a bunch of students who were in their own stages of grief. And there was one girl that her mother was in prison, and we became particularly close. And I think that those moments where, I thought of myself at the time as maybe a mentor, but really I took on a lot of the mothering roles that I do now for my kids. And when I think about it like that, I feel like being a mother has saved me. Like that, those lunchtimes gave me such meaning in my life, just like being a mother now gives me such meaning. And I feel like it's my most important role. And I'm just kind of rambling now, but things have changed so much in 11 years. And I'm so glad I got to do this in my life, whether it was in the teaching or, whether from both the teaching and being a mom to Ruth and Soren. It's just been the greatest joy ever. And I'm so glad I didn't give up 11 years ago, because I was really close to that. And I'm really glad I got to be a mom.
Thank you, Michelle. It's a great remembering of the many ways we mother, and and also, how life is so unpredictable, right? So happy Mother's Day to you.